negative impacts on the British economy, in his view, would certainly never be approved by the populace. Bad calculation, but that's why he.
One of my other friends, who's a lawyer, that's not at this table, said that one of the things they teach in litigation school is never ask a question in court to which you don't already know the answer. But he might have. He knew.
But he had a close call a while back with the Scots and whether or not they were going to remain part of the UK.
And it'll happen again.
And now the Scottish Parliament is talking about another vote. Yeah. Carl Tubin.
There's this interesting side when East Germany and West Germany decided to come together. Mrs. Harriman that morning came up the stairs, and I could tell she was really angry. And I followed her into her office and said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And she took the New York Times and the Washington Post, threw it on her desk. Says, "That's what's wrong." She says, "My former father-in-law is rolling over in his grave to think that Germany is coming together because it's going to bode bad for the future." And says they always come out and they always get strong, etc. And unfortunately, Germany is going to be the strong one standing at the end of this. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people around the world who are thinking, "Oh my God, is Germany going to, have ideas as they've had in two wars?" And you even go back to a few centuries ago when they were also in the middle of a lot of wars in Europe.
Well, arguably the instigator of those wars in Europe. Bob Hines. So with what's going on and the Germans being now the last strong economy standing, and Alan might dispute that, but as far as holding up the rest of the EU, how is this going to play forward? Are the Germans going to be left holding the bag, or could this potentially lead to the entire disintegration of the EU?
I don't think anybody can know, but if the EU falls apart, I would think that Europe, the Western civilization, is going to have a very economic drop, and it's going to be a problem. I hope that wiser heads are coming together and trying to make sure that we don't have every country running in a different direction and just going off and trying to everyone for themselves. Because if it's everyone from itself,
their activities in the Ukraine and other places, I think that was probably more of an outside chance than anything else. But while the conversation was going around the table, the other side of my brain was wondering where the gap in the flag is going to be when they take the star for Great Britain out.
Well, maybe they'll just fade the star a little bit.
Put a patch over it.
I think they ran out of stars, right? So they kept adding countries and didn't add stars. So they don't necessarily need to change it. It's just the EU flag.
Yes.
I think that as countries contemplate nationalist, nativist movements inside, and all this international speculation, gee, who's next? France, Netherlands, Denmark, Italy, Greece, not Greece, because they're dependent on the EU.
Everyone wants to throw Greece out. They're like, hey.
They'll be,
they're probably the ones screaming, "Don't, baby, don't go."
They are already a basket case.
But I think that we've now got a laboratory, if you will, where we're going to see what happens over time to the UK, to the economic, cultural, social, political, security measures in that country, and some of those won't presumably be affected that much. There's still NATO in existence that's not part of this vote. There are security issues and lots of reasons for cooperation in anti-terrorist activity. But if the British economy has what looks like permanent damage to the pound and to British stocks, and possibly to its export and import markets. Curiously, with the drop of the pound, today the UK exports about half of what half of all of its exports go to the EU. So, but the pound just has taken a hammering down more than 10%. Well, what that is all the stuff that people are buying from Great Britain, at least for the moment. Anything they order up tomorrow and lock in a contract will cost 10% less than it does today. So that could actually, at least temporarily, increase exports. But the EU could also say, hey, by the way, all of our trade agreements and financial understandings are out the window, and we're now going to impose a tariff on British goods. We're not going to just sit and accept without any response this 10% reduction in the cost of British goods and services. We don't know how this will play out. So there'll be a lot of talk in these other countries, but I don't see anybody jumping on board and saying, hey, we use the euro now, but let's go back to the French franc. Gee, that's an easy one, and see if we can get benefits that we think Britain might get with a reduced currency. Greece can go back to the drachma. Yeah, Italy can go back to the lira. I don't remember all of these. Not that I ever knew them. All of the various currencies. The reason the EU was created in the first place was it was a horrendously efficient market with contiguous, relatively open borders, but a lot of effort to control the borders, to control the passage of goods and services, to have all sorts of different rules and tariffs on what you can bring in from this country and that country. And they said this is grotesquely inefficient and it harms all of us collectively. If we can create a common market with common rules, we can raise all boats economically.
Well, those common rules are worth noting. I actually looked up something that I thought was actually fake, that the EU actually regulates the amount of cinnamon that can be in baked goods, which even Democrats in this country, for as much as Republicans complain, would never be in favor of such a thing. But Carl Tuvin.
I wouldn't see that.
England has other problems right in its own backyard. Ireland, for example, voted to stay, and
as did Scotland.
As did Scotland. So there's going to be a lot of internal problems there, and from what I have understood over the years, the royal family has a lot of real estate in outside of Germany, outside of England, in Ireland and Scotland, etc. So it's going to be a very interesting situation, and that whoever's the next prime minister is going to have to face all these things. And at some point, they're liable to say, "Let's throw in the towel and let's stay."
Bob Hines.
My guess is that there'll be a little going back and forth, but I cannot see anybody, any country, doing anything stupid. I can't see them.
Or anything else stupid might actually be there.
maybe anything else stupid. I mean, obviously, the relationships between the countries over the last 40 years have been very economically and politically smart, and I can't see that. I don't see that there's too many leaders in very many countries who want to blow that up. So I think there'll be an effort to some way to pull things together and continue on, maybe in a different structure, but I can't see anybody running off all by themselves.
Denise Tripp.
Politically, I think it'll depend on what happens in France. If Le Pen wins, that's going to be a problem. I mean, they flirted with her father for many years, and they always turned her father down. But she could win, and I think the relationship between Le Pen and Merkel, and that's assuming Merkel stays. And she doesn't
expand who Le Pen is for our listeners.
Le Pen is the daughter of a French nationalist who, well, we'll just be honest, is a racist, and doesn't like those who aren't white. And her father came very close to winning several national elections, and they always voted against him at the end. But she is gaining in the polls right now, and that could be very dangerous for the French and German relationship. I can tell you in my industry, which is the shipping industry, they're getting very concerned right now. It's because shipping comes out of London. And if London is no longer tied to the EU, the question is going to be, do we start moving shipping to New York, or are we moving shipping to Copenhagen, or are we going to move it somewhere else? So that's where people are looking at it. The other question is finance, because of the financial sector. Question is going to be, will they stay in London, or there has been a move afoot to go to Singapore as well as going to Dubai. And I can tell you that folks in Dubai are going, yippee, here we go. Let's take a bigger chunk out of London right now. So that's those are two sectors worth looking at.
And Alan Moore, the last word on the topic.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful saying, gosh, the British did this stupid thing. We don't know how this will play out. 52% said, let's do it. And it was, as we pointed out, Northern Ireland and Scotland, Wales, and London, Greater London, who said, no, remain. Everybody else...
Also, the older folks, younger people voted overwhelmingly to stay in.
There were interesting differences. As the old folks who have memories of the quote, good old days, let's make Britain great again, right?
Relate to that.
Saying, gee, we'd like to go back to how it used to be. And
bring back the colonies.
Huge differences here, and there's a lot of hollowing out of the economy in regional centers in a globalized world. So the young people who've moved to London and their parents are still living in Liverpool, saying, "What happened to the shipping industry?" And can we get it back? So there's generational stuff. There's anti-immigration. There's racist. There's this sense of people, nameless people in Brussels making decisions that are binding on the UK. I think that before we say it was a huge mistake, I think it was a mistake. But I don't know how this is going to play out. And before we say other countries are going to either stay in because they don't want this to happen, or they're ready to roll, it remains to be seen. It also remains to be seen what the EU itself does. They recognize there are problems brewing. This is the first true example of how bad that problem is if it hadn't gotten their attention. And there will be a lot of effort by the major partners in the EU to say, what did we do wrong? What can we do collectively to hold this thing together?
Alan Moore, are you offering yourself for a marriage counselor for the EU?
I don't know. I don't begin to know enough
Most counselors know
about this.
Let's stay together for the kids.
But I do think that this is as this thing was evolving and these nationalist movements are growing in other EU countries. It's not like it didn't get their attention, but this is just a big stick across the back of the head of wow. We've got significantly bigger problems than maybe we were willing to acknowledge.
And with that, I'll let that be the last word. But the EU issue is not completely done, because when we come back from break, domestic politics and the EU also are unaffected. Donald Trump took a trip to Scotland and said the pound is down. They took their country back. And by the way, this is good for my golf course here in Scotland. But that and more when we come back.